Boy, we had a little bit of a dust up the other day with, I'm sure everyone's seen the Crystal Ball and RFK Jr. Uh, debate about vaccines. And I just wanted to put my 2 cents in, just like everyone else. So before I get started, a couple of disclosures. Number one, I really like Krystal and Soccer's program. I'm a huge fan of Breaking Points, and even back when they were on the Hill, I thought they were amazing. Their dynamic is one that I actually was trying to emulate on a earlier project, actually one that's still going on that hasn't released yet. But yeah, I appreciate their work, and maybe a little bias in her favor, but probably not, just because I can form my own opinions regardless of her. Additionally, uh, I'm someone that doesn't fuck with anti-vaxxers. So, if that's a problem, sorry, but I'm someone that A, understands science, and B, has had people in my life die from COVID, and C, has a mom that is currently battling cancer and had to battle it through the pandemic, and knowing that she's in a world where people, for whatever reason, can't trust doctors, won't trust science or whatever. It's baffling to me and also kind of pisses me off. But to each their own. Uh, with that said, I actually still like RFK Jr. If I were to rank my current presidential candidates right now, he would be number one, followed closely by Marianne Williamson. And the reason being, in my mind, despite my, uh, I'll say outright disdain for the anti-vax, anti-logic, he is so far more anti-war than Marianne Williamson, or at least has said he is. And to me, one anti-vaxxer versus the the possibility of World War III, it doesn't measure the same. So, despite what I'm about to say, uh, RFK Jr. is still my number one pick at this moment. So we've all seen the debate, and I want to break down some of the common nonsense that gets talked about when anti-vaxxers talk about what they know, and all this information, blah blah blah, and how they argue the very concept of it. So we're going to go through the entire. It's almost a 10-minute video. I'm going to go through it nearly line by line and break down some of the misconceptions and idiocracy that comes out of the sector. So let's go ahead and get this started.
So let me ask you about vaccines. This is an area where you and I have significant differences. And, just to level with you on this, like a lot of what you say I really respond to. I think you're a very genuine person. But the across the board, whether you want to call it vaccine skepticism or anti-vax advocacy, which has been a central part of what you've been up to for the past number of years, for me personally, it's an issue.
First off, Krystal's being very nice. This term vaccine skepticism, it's a nonsense term. I'll get into it more later on, but he's not skeptical of the vaccines. He's an anti-vaxxer. It's not something that he has questions on. It's not something he's like looking for solutions for. He's just not about them. Okay.
It's an issue, and it's a real sort of red line. And I know I'm not alone in that, especially running in a Democratic primary. There are going to be other millions of people like me who have similar concerns. So how do you win them over? What's your message to people who think like I do?
Well, but just tell me where you think I got it wrong.
Well, I think you get it wrong when you draw a correlation between the rise of things like autism and the introduction of vaccines when there isn't hard scientific evidence tying those things together.
How do you know? Let me ask you this. How do you know there's not a hard scientific evidence?
Well, because the one major study that purported to show that was retracted, and the scientist who conducted it was, was
now, what you're doing now,
basically
Krystal,
fraudulently.
Okay, so whatever study she's talking about, and whatever thing RFK is about to tee up, it doesn't matter. The fundamental misunderstanding and problem with anti-vaxxers is that their logic is forever a causation correlation problem. And when it comes to a lot of these topics, as far as like, well, how do we know, your science is right and my science is wrong? The problem is you can't account for all the different variables that happen within a person's life, a community, their lifestyle. There's so many things that go on as far as, what could affect their health. Like to try to pinpoint it on something is extremely difficult. Now, the thing with science, though, is science because it allows a person to make predictions. Okay, if you give 100 kids lead water and have them drink it, you have 100 fucked up kids. Okay, you can make a clear causation correlation connection between drinking lead water and brain damage, right? You can't do that with the vaccines, because if you look at how many kids and how many people have the original vaccines from the ones you get from your childhood, it's about 90%, give or take, of American people have those original vaccines. Okay, let's see, what's 90%? What do we got? Like 330 million people. Let's see here. If there was a causation, or if vaccines were causing autism, you'd have, what's a fair amount? I mean, it should be 100%, but to be fair, you'd have at least 50% of the people that got the shot would have autism. Okay, if you're 90% of the people in America have been vaccinated, that's 297 million people that are vaccinated in this country. If you take 50%, you should have somewhere close to 150 million people with autism. That's not the case. The number of people that are autistic in America is like 2%. So that should tell you right then and there that there's no real correlation between getting vaccinated and autism. Okay, so he's gonna probably say some shit about like, oh, I got doctors to say this and that. Okay, but that's not how this thing works. Okay, you can find there are scientists and doctors that can say, climate change isn't real. They'll sit there and tell you, what did they say? There was no, like, cigarettes didn't cause cancer. Like, they'll say all sorts of shit. All right, but you should be able to tell just by looking at the numbers that that's not the fact.
Created. Listen,
no.
Hold on.
You're
but I don't want to get in a debate with you about this, because you've spent your life pulling out this study. Now, I will tell you. Let me just tell you.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Let me just tell you.
I'm not paid.
I've listened to
hundreds and hundreds. Okay.
Hours of interviews with you with an open mind, and I'm not persuaded. Now, maybe I'm wrong. That's possible. I'll hold it out there. People can watch. I thought Megyn Kelly did a phenomenal interview with you that went through all these claims piece by piece by piece. I really encourage people to watch that whole exchange, because we won't be able to do it justice here in the 5 minutes we have left. But there are going to be people like me who aren't persuaded and who see this as an issue. And the fact that it's been such a central part of your advocacy means I can't just sort of put it to the side and say, oh, well, I'll just ignore, this piece that's been really important to you in your life. So you're running in a Democratic primary. You have a lot of people who feel even more strongly than me, who think that, Dr. Fauci is a hero and all of these things.
Dr. Fauci is a liar. Let's just be honest about that.
Things. How are you going to persuade them? How are you going to reach them? And what is your message to them?
Well, first of all, I'm not leading with, my opinions about vaccines. But what I say to people is, show me where I got it wrong. Show me where I got my science wrong. I've written books about this. I wrote a...
He's written, but I don't know. I'm pretty sure I know enough about RFK Jr. to know he's not any sort of scientist. And even if he was, that doesn't mean you're automatically right about whatever it is you're thinking. Science is typically a communal sort of thing where, one scientist does something, the other scientist fact check. Not just to fact check and make sure you've done your work correct, but to make sure it's duplicatable. So in a bizarre world where RFK is actually doing research and like actually in the lab, like mixing beakers and petri discs and shit like that, he would still need to display a duplicatable link between vaccine A and autism, which he cannot do. No one can.
Book about a link between thimerosal and autism that has, I think, 450 distilled scientific studies that confirm and validate that hypothesis, and 1,400 references. And if I got something wrong, show me
If there was a link, you'd have way more people with autism.
where it is.
But I think people have shown you where things are wrong, but you don't want to hear it. Is because I've seen, numerous fact checks. Dr. Vinay Prasad, who we, really respect on the COVID vaccine. He went through your interview with Alvin. He did a fact check. I mean, it's not.
And I
people
did
have
a fact check of Vinay, and you should read that.
I will take a look at it, but I don't think that it's fair to say
Krystal,
nobody has ever pointed out anything that's been wrong.
Well, here.
Oh, and that's actually a good point by Krystal in the sense that anti-vaxxers typically they ask you like, what do you think I got wrong? Krystal isn't a scientist either. Okay, this isn't her thing. It's you're coming up with a scientific conclusion. Okay, your battle isn't against the crystal balls of the world. Your battle is against like 2 million scientists and doctors that say otherwise. Okay. So if you ever get into the box with an anti-vaxxer, make sure you remind them right away that you, as someone who is not a scientist, is saying the opposite of what all these other scientists who have a demonstrated history of not only understanding what they're doing by being professional, but also curing and saving the lives of people, which you have not done. One of the ways you can tell he's an anti-vaxxer is because, despite him saying that he has all these scientists behind him, Nobel Peace Prize winners and like high level officials like at his back to do all this work, you'll notice that in the midst of all of this talk about wanting, safer vaccines and, just being skeptical about the vaccines, you'll notice that despite having all these scientists with him, at no point did they ever make a safer vaccine. RFK and his group have been at this for years and have not once put out a safer vaccine for anybody. They don't want to admit it, maybe not to themselves, that they're actually anti-vaxxers. They desperately think that they're trying to help people, which is commendable. Obviously, we should be skeptical on anything and everything, if it comes with people's lives are at risk. So we need people there to do the questioning. But at some point, you just got to be like, hey, we don't have enough evidence to go against what's being said right now, which is the case with these guys.
Here's what people complain about what I say. And I'm not leading on this issue, so people can either take it or leave it. But if you want to, what you just said about me, that I'm sort of hard-headed and stubborn and just won't give in.
She didn't really say that, though it is true.
You're wrong about that. If somebody shows me where I'm wrong, I'm going to correct it. And, we have the...
Are you, though? Like, how many people need to say that for you to correct it? It's like, the idea that this is like, how are you going to measure that? Is it because the consensus already says you're wrong? So if the consensus isn't enough, then what is?
Probably the most robust fact-checking operation now in North America. I have 350 PhD scientists and MD physicians on.
350 seems like a lot of people, but compared to what? The million that say otherwise? Anti-vaxxers think these numbers are the same.
CHD's advisory board, including until recently, Luc Montagnier won the Nobel Prize for discovering the HIV virus.
Okay, so he discovered the HIV virus, so that means he understands how autism works. I don't understand why he even brought that up.
Chris Portier, who's the head of the National Toxicity Program at NIH, formerly, that probably.
Okay, that's fine too, but like, what does that have to do with anything? Like, these people aren't. Is the belief that these people, these two people, is it that they outrank everyone on the planet? Like, how does this work? What's the logic behind this?
The top toxicologists in America. And if I were saying things that were scientifically unsound, those people would not stay with us.
Are you sure? I mean, they're just as valuable as any other people on the planet. It's it seems like this whole vaccine thing, this vaccine anti-vaccine position, it's not based on science. It's based on an emotion thing. So just like a scientist can also be, you would think they're the most logical people on the planet. They also can go to church and believe in whatever religion that they believe in, whatever God they think. It doesn't make sense. I understand that, but we can't keep quoting these people as if they are in fact, this is a fallacy. This is an appeal to authority, and it's not even a very good one in this case.
I would say to you is show me where I got it wrong. Show me a study where I got wrong, and I will change my.
Well, if you just look at the world and open your eyes, you'd see there aren't that many autistic people relative to how many people have gotten vaccinated. That should be enough, but that's, as we've established, this isn't a logic thing.
My position, science is fluid. It's not an embarrassment to me if there's a new scientific study that I haven't seen that comes out and says I'm wrong. That's what you're supposed to do with science. But what I'm saying to you, nobody has done that. If Vinay Prasad, when he did his piece, if he showed me science that was valid.
That was valid? What does that mean now? Is it, so whatever, how is it invalid? Like what, I'd like to see what made this other science invalid in his mind? Like, why is it like this other thing just can't be true? And, somehow you just disregard it again as a non-scientist, but we'll get.
I would say I would change my position.
If we got the two of you together,
read my response to him.
So you say this isn't what you're leading with, but I just have to say, as someone who, is watching your candidacy closely and is aware of the advocacy you've been doing and, the organization that you are involved with, it's hard for me to believe this won't be an important part of how you govern. So I think that's the most important piece for people to get, who you have to accept there are going to be people like me who just don't agree with you on this. You certainly understand that there are many who do think that the vaccines that we have are more beneficial than harmful, that, got their kids vaccinated and are happy for that decision. So how is this going to impact the way that you govern, or does it not at all?
I mean, I'm going to govern according to, evidence-based medicine.
Can't do that if you only accept certain forms of evidence.
Oh, that's
so
the way.
Let me give a specific question. If there's another pandemic, in the last pandemic, former President Trump, something we gave him a lot of credit for, he launched Operation Warp Speed. They had a whole of government approach. They used the mRNA technology that was developed using, U.S. taxpayer dollars to get a vaccine out to the population as quickly as possible. How would your approach have differed?
My approach would have been a science-based approach.
Which means what?
Which means and a medicine-based approach, the approach that has been used and approved for decades. You look first at therapeutics that are off the shelf, and you look at the efficacy of those. I mean, what I would have done if I was in power then, I would have created an information grid, because now we have this internet that is supposed to benefit us and has become instead an instrument for,
All right, so first off, again, we'll do a science-based and medical-based approach. Okay, again, it doesn't help if you're only willing to accept certain conclusions. Now, the other thing is that we'll look for off the shelf things. And listen, first off, that implies that we didn't do that for every other disease that we've ever had to encounter, which of course we do. It's ridiculous, okay? But the other thing is, obviously we're not talking about that. We're talking about when your Advil doesn't work, what are you going to do as far as getting together a vaccine or whatever treatment necessary to stop potentially millions of lives from being lost. During the pandemic, we didn't do what we did just because we felt like shutting down the economy or whatever. Like shit was getting rough, okay? We were going over a cliff, and we did drastic things, and we can argue over whether those things were correct at the time they were done. If you want to, I surely have my own criticisms, but this idea that we didn't take a science approach is insanity.
totalitarian control.
Oh, and also, I just want to say that, yeah, we have the technology to have more robust databases for like scientists and doctors to communicate, share notes, and this and that. That's actually a really good idea. So I will give them that.
Control, but let's use it for something good. Let's link all 15 million doctors, frontline physicians all over the world, and find out what they're doing to treat this new respiratory virus, and find out what they're saying is working and not working, and then test that with science, and then turn it instantaneously into protocols and recommendations for other scientists.
So would a vaccine development be part of that or no?
Well, I don't think the vaccine worked. I think, if you think it worked, then try to explain to me the countries that were unvaccinated did much better than our.
Many of those countries.
He should probably try to explain why so many countries were wanting the vaccine if they didn't think it'll work. And also, what does he mean it didn't work? It worked. Well, Krystal's going to lay it out here in a bit, but like, what are these measurements that we're taking? Like, what does it mean? What does he mean it didn't work? It clearly worked. We know it worked. Okay, yeah, he needs to.
Because there are a lot of different factors in various countries. So a lot of those countries, as you pointed out before,
why do we have the highest death rate count in the world by far?
I think there are a lot of factors that may go.
Highest death rate? I don't know, because guns and heart. Is that what he means? Like, why do we? Okay, yeah, it's just he's all over the place.
Into that. One of them is the fact that we are disproportionately obese as a society. We have the negative health outcomes that you've been talking about. We don't go outside as much.
Why is that? Because we're uniquely per capita overweight. We have a sedentary life because we don't have we're in the Italy where we bike and walk everywhere. But that is not because of the vaccines. We've been dealing with this problem for decades.
Such as countries, say in Africa. I mean, there are a lot of different factors that may play into that. But I will say, did the vaccines work in the way they were initially promised to prevent spread? No, I don't think so, especially once you got to later variants. But we have a lot of data that...
It's called context, folks. And that's something the anti-vaxxer will not grapple with. The anti-vaxxer thought that the vaccines that were formulated for the alpha strain and worked against not only just keeping you from getting sick, but also spread. Obviously, you can't spread something you can't get that you're not sick with, right? Like, that makes sense. Okay. But once we got to the later strains, it didn't work then. But if in the mind of the anti-vaxxer, because it didn't work on the Delta strain as well as it did with the Alpha strain, it validates their overall belief that vaccines didn't work. That's not how it happened, okay? At one point, they were working against when we were just fighting the Alpha strain. Once we got to the later variants, then all bets are off. But we were still trying. It still helped prevent people from getting seriously sick.
Shows that in terms of reducing severe hospitalization and death, the vaccines were really important. And maybe there was a cost-benefit analysis.
I want to see that data. I know that's what the industry says.
There is lots of...
The industry says, okay, also reality. If you just, again, look at the window and just see that we don't have, a million people dying.
And not just from here, from around the world, that shows the vaccine doses, and not just our vaccines, but ones that were created all around the world, reduce severe hospitalization and death. So in that way, yes, I do very much believe that they work.
And let me tell you something. What I believe you're doing now is you're parroting what the public health agencies have been saying.
Okay, so this is hilarious, all right? Neither Krystal nor RFK Jr. are doctors. Both of them are getting their information from outside experts, right? Supposedly. In RFK's mind and the anti-vaxxers' mind, if you say what the pro-vaccine people say, you are parroting what they're saying. If you say what the anti-vax doctors are saying, now you have the real science. That's how that works, okay? Never mind the fact that he just said he only had 450 scientists that backed him. Krystal isn't parroting just 300 people or 400 people. She has the entire overwhelming consensus at her back, right? At some point, is not called parody. You're just talking about reality, man.
But they do not have a scientific basis for that. And I have another book out that you should look at called Died Suddenly that goes through all the Johns Hopkins data, which is the dashboard data that everybody uses.
I guarantee that data is not only misstated, but highly out of context.
And shows exactly what happened when first of all, in
addition to being circumstantial.
Even the vaccine, the Case Western study that is probably the largest, most recent, shows that at most the vaccine gives you a very, very small amount of protection, and that after 7 months,
probably now, since we had a chance to nip this in the bud, we as a species proved that we're just not ready to cooperate on a level like that, and we lost. So yeah, if you're someone who doesn't get vaccinated now, I mean, why would you? It's like we've lost that battle.
You go into negative efficacy. So you are more, if you got vaccinated, you're more likely to get sick. You're more likely to get severe.
Is that a bad thing? You guys don't seem to care about even catching COVID. In fact, some of you actually recommended for natural immunities, which is like, son, what's the point of getting immune if you already caught the shit? Right? Like, it's not called immunity if you constantly have to get sick to get the fucking immunity.
Severe illness, and you're more likely to die than if you were unvaccinated.
I have not seen that. I have seen study after study that shows the opposite. Listen, I don't want to get bogged down in this because I don't think we're going to see eye to eye here, and we have some other questions we want to get to, and your time is short. But we'll put in post, please send us what you're looking at.
Yeah, we're happy to
We'll put what I'm
in.
looking at, and people can judge for themselves. Hey guys, ready or?
Okay, yeah. So RFK, that was a clinic in just how to obfuscate and talk about just this minority position of vaccines that is completely unfounded, and yeah, it's just unfortunate. But like I said, he's still my top guy. I'm not gonna let this thing stop me from supporting him, when the time comes, if we get that opportunity. Hopefully they get these debates in so we can see the real juxtaposition between Marianne Williamson and RFK. That's, for me, that's my only. I don't need to see what Joe Biden has to say. I already know he's terrible. So that's a foregone conclusion. But anyway, yeah, if you think I'm wrong or shed some less than fair light on RFK, let me know in the comments. And yeah, talk to you later. Bye.